this very special episode of Quaker. I'm joined on the channel by Jethro, and we're going to be talking today about QUNO, Jethro can explain what QUNO is, and the summer school which he's just been on. So, Jethro, thanks you very much for coming on. I thought we'd just start by introducing yourself, maybe talking about your Quaker journey, and start from there.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on, Ollie. I'm very happy to be here. I wasn't aware of Quaker podcasts. It's always great to see the movement active in the 21st century. A lot of Christianity feels a little bit outdated, but Quakers, I came along for the first time like a couple of years ago and discovered that this is like a bunch of like woke pensioners. Like, where has this been my whole life? I'm very happy to be here and see what you're doing here. That also kind of partly answers your first question there, which is how I discovered Quakers. This sort of like little spiritual interest that like existed, having left a more traditional form of Christianity. That I was raised with, and I'd always kind of been interested in like how people make themselves believe this stuff. I'd ended up in like a Church of Scientology and like chatting to Mormons, just kind of curious, like what goes through these people's heads. They're kind of so famously kind of well known outside their circles as being kind of nuts. And so I stumbled across Quakers purely out of this interest of like, oh, it's this like weird niche Christian thing. Like, I bet it's a cult. And I rock up to the first meeting down in Brighton. They have a nice meeting house down there. And it was just people were in silence. And then we had like cups of tea afterwards and like chatted about our criticisms of religion. And it was beautiful. I was like, hold on a sec, where's the curtain to peer behind? So I, in that moment, was like, I think I might have found a religious movement that I can actually get on board with. Specifically, the thing that I really love about Quakers is like the fact that silence is the most important thing. You're not expected to come along and believe anything. You're not expected to try to convince anyone of anything at all. It just is like, come as yourself.
I think that's the idea of if you're going to join Quakers, you have to be completely cool with the woke pensioner aspect. So you said you came from like a more traditional form of Quaker Christianity. What sort of Christianity was that? I'm curious, just because of like maybe any similarities that you notice between previous traditional Christian experience and Quakers.
Yeah, okay, interested in the similarities. Yeah, it's mostly differences. So it was I think it was a Methodist church. Because I know that Anglicans tend to have sort of pews. It's quite a nice sort of family church, like loads of like very kid friendly, people up at the front with like guitars and drum kit, like all the modern Christian songs. Very kind of nice, wholesome community. But it always felt that I guess the thing that I reflect on is that there was this kind of brainwashy thing about it. It always felt as though people were wanting to interpret the Bible to solve their personal problems. And in doing that, felt inspired by God to share that with others, as though that was a kind of correct interpretation of the theology. And I started going, well, there are actual theologians out there. There are people that study this stuff and know what it represents. And you look into that and you go, well, actually, like, it's to some degree historical. The Bible is an interesting historical artifact. But then as you go back, things become legend, as like all stories from the past tend to. So you kind of become a bit more critical, and it kind of muddies into this. It's worth asking questions, but it's not worth claiming that you have answers.
Because I mean, very similarly, and I think because there aren't very many Quakers that come into Quakerism from like childhood or anything, which is a massive shame. But just the way but then what I think it does give us is that it gives us these stories and you get lots of different prior experiences that people have had outside of Quakerism before coming, and I think those are quite interesting. So basically, it's like this idea for you of that. Well, the sort of Quaker message of being open to being mistaken, and that you might have got something, but you may be wrong, and you're continually learning, continually developing. Brighton, is that still your current meeting?
No, I actually only went to that meeting once. So I now live in London. I realise as well, I didn't properly introduce myself. I've just launched straight into thoughts on Quakers. So
That's cool.
I'm a software developer. I live in London, in East London. I love it. It's great. I do lots of things, have lots of projects. And Quakers are this fantastic sort of consistent thing. For me, I go out all the way over to West London every other approximately Sunday. And I think this is one of the largest in London as well. At least I get the impression. I've been to 2 or 3 here in London, and yeah, going over to West Hampstead, it's a very lovely part. Actually, kind of different in feel and vibe from Brighton. It's quite sort of countryside-esque, and it feels kind of very relaxed and accomplished atmosphere. And they've again got a very they've got a very strong base, lots of sort of like regulars and lots of young people there as well, which is interesting. When I had some friends that I met at QUNO come down to visit, they noticed how like young and lively this was. I think it's further up north. Again, I haven't really been up there to Quaker meetings, but the impression that I got was that the Quaker community tends to be a bit older up there.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's probably. I mean, I'd like to think that's probably the same with all denominations, and probably not just Quakers. But yeah, I think I've never really experienced city. Well, I know West Hampstead, but I mean I've never really experienced city Quakerism before. I've only experienced rural Quakerism, which yes is certainly more old. Can I ask how many roughly on a given Sunday? How many would you say? How many Quakers are there?
Ooh.
Or
it depends. It depends. The crowd tends to shift. Maybe 30 is about an approximate number, 20 to 30.
Yeah.
But then it can go up to sort of 50 on a busy day.
Wow. Yeah. My first Quaker meeting, I think we were averaging maybe around 12, 15 on a good day. My current meeting, which is strangely way more rural, but we probably have around 20, maybe 25, 30 on a good day. So yeah, it's just interesting to see. I mean, our meeting hours probably didn't take much. I'm in Cornwall, so I go to a really lovely meeting house. I think it's 17th century. It's really old. It's got like thatched roof and the whole shebang. It's really nice. But it's just not. But then, as I said, that's kind of rural Quakerism. But then seeing I've had no experience of urban Quakerism. So do you want to maybe just? I think probably a helpful place to start off then is maybe just talking us through what QUNO is. I've left it as the acronym, so maybe you can unpack that for us, and then talk about maybe what it is, what you knew about it before you went, and what it does, what interested you, things like that.
So I was first introduced to the existence of QUNO at the end of a meeting. Someone stood up to give a notice, one of the elders, and he said a little bit about the work of QUNO, and then mentioned that they have a summer school coming up, and he sort of I was sitting over there, and he was looking that way, and he kind of as he mentioned that the summer school was coming up, he gave me one of those, and I was like, oh, yeah. You well, okay. And then we had a conversation afterwards, and he mentioned, oh, well, and as well, if the money's a factor, well, we can get you funded to do this as well. And he was this impression of just go do this thing. This seems like you'd enjoy it. You get a lot out of it. We want you to go. So that was that was how I was first introduced to it. I had I guess somewhat of an interest in the United Nations before. QUNO, by the way, standing for Quaker United Nations Organization. It's a pretty plain and simple name. I had somewhat of an interest in the UN, it's international government. It's relevant to everyone, at least to some extent. And the chance to go to Geneva, why not?
Absolutely. And I love the way that you I think that's a very Quaker thing as well. It's yeah, there's this thing going on. Young person, would you like to do it? I'm like, yeah, go on then, why not? And so let's talk about funding, because this whole meeting came about because we are both lucky beneficiaries of the Living Adventurously Grant. So I've done a video on that already, but do you maybe want to talk about how you heard about it, what you had to do to apply for it, what that process was like?
This is something that I was let known by one of the elders as well, is that there are a lot of like wealthy Quaker funds out there, which, looking into this, it makes complete sense in the history of Quakers, who started off as this like radical offshoot of Christianity. They were like rejected from Parliament. They weren't allowed to vote, all this kind of thing, and they formed their own communities, this very, very strong bond, helping one another out in business. And this is like one of
Mm.
those core things. People know Quaker Oats. They are not actually like made by, they're not a Quaker company, but like the brand of being a Quaker company was so strong at that point that, clearly that worked for the oat people. There are loads of these big companies, like there's Cadbury's, Rowntree's, there's like Lloyd's Bank, is a very strong tradition. And so there are these like enormous Quaker funds out there, and they just want to like support young people to further their like the interests of Quakers, as those interests, I guess, are developed over time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it. Yeah, of course. That it's a case of uh, that the reason why these funds are and these grants are available is because of the sort of the isolation of this community. Yeah, I hadn't really linked the two together before, but I think obviously, especially they're very. I think Quakers are obviously very keen on young people, as all denominations are, and so I think it's. I think this what is one of many that are available, but I think obviously this is useful for young people because I think this is the main grant that is available. What did you have to do to apply? Was it simple? How long did the process take?
Very simple process. It was a form, it was an application. I think it helps having references from within the Quaker community.
Mm.
Yeah, it was. In fact, like it was quite a nice sort of no strings attached. Like I made sure to be transparent the whole time, and sort of the response I got was like, "Yeah, well, like give us a report afterwards," and that's what we're interested in, is like a report about your experience. What did you think of it? And
Mm.
this, I mean, it's very Quakely in being deliberately simple. Really, I felt encouraged from that to like go out and experience it really genuinely. I wasn't trying to prove that I had had a certain experience. I could go and really explore and then say what I thought afterwards.
So, did you have any background in, I don't know, like politics or anything like that before that, or was this something that was, something that interested you, but not necessarily had any background in just going in?
So this actually came with quite good timing for me. This year, living in East London, I've been at a very special and interesting place called the London College of Political Technology, uh,
Hmm.
also known as Newspeak House. It's a very fun place that is all about trying to take technological approaches to the way that politics is done, whether this is thinking with a sort of technical mindset about politics, for example, like the way that Putin does kind of social engineering things, and going, well, what
Hmm.
what, what takes place over in kind of Western European countries, like how do decisions get made in a kind of liberal context, as well as actual like technology writing code stuff. So the civic tech community, people that like will go and collect obscure data sets and make them available to the NGOs that need it. That kind of technology.
Oh, yeah.
And so
So,
this
yeah.
has given me an interest in, I guess, UK governance, and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of like how do important decisions get made? What are the dynamics at play? What is actually important about like that space of politics and government? Is it all just like people talking at each other and doing like a bunch of sort of PR public relations stuff, or
Hmm.
where's the meat to it? And so then going to the UN, I can see how this stuff translates over. And so I go, well,
Yeah.
there's this whole thing that like emerged super deliberately, and it's trying to get every single nation to talk to one another. And in that, there's something that is very different from being a normal nation that exists alongside other nations. The fact that the United Nations exists means that there's kind of no one in charge. Because if someone tries to claim charge, then everyone else points the finger and goes, "You're not allowed to do that. We're going to be united. Stop doing that." So there's this very interesting kind of dynamic about the whole space, which is that everything has to be done by consensus. No one's allowed to kind of pop out and go like, "Right, I'm leading this group." There's no prime minister, no president that goes like, "We're doing this now." it's endless kind of committees and this kind of monolithic architecture moving along, aiming to represent the views of loads and loads of nations all at the same time.
So you went to Geneva, and do you want to just paint the picture of what that was like? What had you been to Switzerland before? Had you been to Geneva before? What were your experiences of this summer school?
So it was the first time I've been to Switzerland. Phenomenal, like really beautiful landscape. We were actually staying right by the lake, so really like wonderful view. We went for a hike on one of those days as well. Famously, Geneva has a lot of. They're famous for the watches, the Swiss watches. Famous for the banks as well. And then somehow the architecture seems to have fallen behind. So I can't say anything about Zurich. I can't say anything about the rest of Switzerland. But Geneva has like a lot of big block bank buildings and a lot of big block hotels. And then they have a really stupendously amazing lake right in the middle. And then there's like, I don't know, somehow it didn't feel like I wanted to take loads of photos. I just criticized the whole city. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that.
Well, we apologise to any Swiss listeners, but to be honest, actually, I mean, if they're not from Geneva, they're probably all hating on Geneva anyway. So, I mean, we apologise in advance to any Genevans. Unreservedly, there are some hideous cities and architecture in the UK as well. Glass houses.
We can take it as from a point of humility as well here, don't we?
As you would describe it, what is the role of QUNO? What does it do within? Because obviously the whole point of the United Nations is that it's a place where the international community can meet and discuss and come to agreements and stuff. So what is the role of Quakers there?
So there are lots of NGOs, missions in Geneva, and they do, I mean, each of them has their own interests. They've got some funding from philanthropy, from whatever the fund, the source is, and they have some work. Often, this is the thing that we're told kind of in the first couple of days, often what tends to happen with these NGOs is they focus on these kind of politically sexy issues. So things that are meant to be popular at the time. Whatever an example of one of those is, like, I don't know, something comes up, something's in the news, all of a sudden the NGOs are kind of fighting for rights on a specific thing. So right now they might be focusing on like things related to Ukraine and Russia and things that are kind of relevant to that sort of space. And then Quakers sometimes are attracted by this if it's important, but the merits of having their own property in Geneva, having the actual Quaker house there, is that they're able to focus on kind of longer term issues. So they can go, well, this is the thing that we think is important. These are where our values take us, and we are going to work on that continuously. And they don't need to worry about, where's the funding coming from? Like, how do we make the application here? They can go, that's important. We want to get there.
So two things. Do you know it's a charity, isn't it? So you can give money to QUNO. We'll just make the plug now that if you do want to give money to QUNO, then I'll put a link at the bottom and you can make that money. So you got this idea that then because they're not looking at always not that they can't look at the sexy things, but that they're not only focused on the sexy things, and they're not looking necessarily at just short-term things. They can really like develop their presence. They can make slow and gradual change on a policy that they think that they're interested in. I suppose two questions from that: what things are they interested in, and then how do they look to implement that?
One good example that I was given by, I think it was Lindsay, is landmines. Landmines are illegal in war as a result of a conversation that first took place in the Quaker House.
That's good.
So, yeah. I mean, they did a good job on that one. And I'm not sure kind of what things aligned, but this is, where their reputation comes from is they do plug along at something for a long time. Like, this is horrific. Like, looking at the consequences of landmines, like using, chemical warfare, already heavily sanctioned. Landmines, this should be in that category. And then, speaking to the right people, going through that process. In fact, these things, I get an impression they can be pretty political, in general, like just like national politics. people have their interests, they want their interests to be represented, and in order to do that, they might make certain sacrifices of other interests, and they might concede to other people's interests in order to get theirs through. That's the way that politics works.
Mm.
The way that Quakers go is they have this reputation for being, screw that politics doesn't exist to them. It is about being quiet and being thoughtful. And in fact, the politics you find it very quickly kind of vanishes. It just sort of evaporates into nowhere. If you sit people quietly in a circle to just sort of say what they think, and all of a sudden the kind of judgment fades away, these kind of like fast, rapid waves of like, oh, what do I think they think? What do they think I think they think? It just, it just goes. And so this brings me on to what I believe to be the most like positively impactful things that Quakers do, which is they do quiet diplomacy. So they have some really fantastic connections with a lot of diplomats. I've been making friends over time, and these diplomats prioritize these dinners at Quaker House, which, sort of 20 of them, they have a kind of beyond Chatham House rule thing. So diplomats will arrive, sit at the table, they don't talk afterwards about what they talk about. But the whole point is that it's finally an opportunity for them to actually like be themselves. So there's a very interesting thing with diplomats, which is that they are there to represent their country's interests. And so they are a person with their own interests, their own like individual goals and reason they got into being a diplomat in the first place, that is there specifically to represent the interests of their country, which have been determined, at home. And so that's all they do. This is exactly what the diplomats' jobs are. And so it means if you have any kind of like internal conflict between what your government thinks and what you think, you end up in like kind of so balled up. So diplomats are finally able to like be as free as they'd like to be. They get the option to say, how they understand the problem themselves, and they get to be personal. And that's something that is very rare in that UN space where people are representing an entire country. And like, understandably, they're not just representing themselves. They are representing huge numbers of people at once. And in fact, they weren't even elected to be doing that position. So it's like, they better be damn responsible about it. So all of a sudden they get to actually like communicate freely with one another. And this just turns those wheels of generating that policy, writing that new legal statement about climate change, or about human rights, about whatever the other pieces of Quaker work there are that happens to be on topic at that time.
So that's the primary method that Quakers are looking to check. I'm just trying to get it. So because I was kind of, well, I like the idea of a dinner, and I think that's obviously the best way to attract people to come. Obviously, food is always great. In my mind, I was kind of thinking it was like they come in for like a meeting for worship, and they all like. But I think that might be. I don't think we'd get necessarily many diplomats would come to that. And I suppose it's cool because it links. I feel like that sort of approach links with our testimonies really quite nicely. So that people get the opportunity to be truthful, that people get the opportunity to be simple because they're not overburdened by like what they think they ought to say, representing their country versus how they feel, and obviously equal as well. So it's bringing all of these, and hopefully obviously peaceful. I mean, hopefully there haven't been any all out dinner fights over at Quaker House. That might be
well, that's all beyond Chatham House rule. We don't know what goes on behind those doors. So the way they structure these, so they took us through a kind of mock of how they do it, and they sat us all around the table. They gave us some nice nuts and things. And the way that they run this is each person is given the opportunity to speak. They can speak once before they need to wait for everyone else to finish speaking. So you can only speak once during the dinner until everyone else has spoken. And you can speak for no longer than 3 minutes at a time. If you start rambling, then you're going to get a quiet hand from Lindsay, you've had your share of time now. And this approach forces everyone to firstly listen to one another. There's no over talking. There's no like that person's more important than that person, so I'll like leave them the other side of the room and I'll go over there. It's all everyone is mutually important, which is exactly the principle of what the UN is about. You can talk about the structure of the UN and how we have the kind of permanent S5 permanent council out there. There's a hierarchical structure within the UN that suddenly is forced to not exist, and people are forced to listen to one another, as well as like given the opportunity to say what they think, which they might not even realize that they thought before. And then at the same time, they're kind of forced to interact with one another by sharing food as well. They did quite a nice thing, which is they had little pots of nuts and drinks and things kind of dotted around. So there was this kind of in the silence having to sort of indicate to one another, can we help me with it? Yeah. So, and this like form of communication is very, very humanizing. And I think that echoes more widely, I think, to the impression that I got from QUNO, from the work that they do there, is it's all about humanizing this like UN monster.
I suppose it's kind of like the Quaker business model as well, isn't it? The idea that, a Quaker business meeting where, they're not there to find a majority. They're not there to find, it's not one person's view over the other and that person wins. It's the discussion. It's one person speaking at a time. It's a coming together of opinions, and then it's the clerk's job to try and put those all together, and then maybe something coming out of that. But I suppose I think this is ultimately when things are fraught and when things are difficult and when people disagree. I think you're absolutely right, that humanizing aspect, and that is really important. And just simply giving people time to be around the same table and to talk to people out of the public eye, I think is probably the best way of getting a lot of the stuff done.
So what we got up to, we were given a very busy schedule. There were, I think, 20 of us, maybe it was like 18, 19, 20 of us. And we're all staying in one hostel. So start of the day, we'd all travel to Quaker House. We'd have some kind of like introduction for the day. There were, most commonly, it was things like panels. So we'd have like some of the Quaker connections, people coming in, people like diplomats, people that run NGOs, lots of like really impressive people that we're kind of right in the center of. And we're kind of like seeing this all happen around us, like holding us. So this is like Quakers, like we know that we're like kind of obscure, but they're here and they're like well respected by a huge number of influential people. Like, what's going on here? And loads of like fascinating people, just like every single day. People in the human rights space, people in the environment space, people in the economic space, loads of different groups, all the work that they do, all kind of in one place, hearing from the people that actually do this stuff. And then the other thing that we did a lot of was visiting UN spaces. So there are 2 different days that were in the kind of central UN complex, which is, if you've seen all those like tourist photos of the big like lines of flags, we spent a lot of time taking photos there. Then there was, really interestingly, there was the WTO, the World Trade Organization. They have a really interesting building that they inherited from the World Labour Organization when the World Labour Organization got too large. And it's really interesting, elaborate buildings and really cool murals. And we had a fantastic talk there as well. So we did lots of these kinds of tours, lots of visiting parts of the UN. And it was a good time to do it as well, actually, because those 2 weeks are kind of quiet weeks. So there's a lot that, a lot of like empty offices at that time. So we got to kind of have the space to ourselves, as it were. Also something particularly interesting, which I'll continue with my kind of like poking and asking critical questions because no one's stopping me, is that the UN at the moment has this, I think it's the something budget liquidity crisis, ongoing liquid budget crisis, something like that. And basically it means that they're no longer paying to keep the lights on and heat the building and run the escalators out of this, what seems like a bit of a political move, because there's so many international people coming through and they're giving this impression of like, hey, look, guys, the UN's running out of money. What are you doing here? To get the countries to pay their dues, because there's a kind of fee to be part of the UN. And again, part of this, like, no one has absolute control. No one can make anyone do anything because it's just this enormous kind of conference. Clearly, getting countries to actually pay up their kind of adjusted to GDP fee is a bit of a challenge. So there is quite an interesting kind of move that they made there.
So you're there with about 20 other people. Were they Quakers, and where were they from?
Last year, I was given an impression that they only had like maybe sort of 3 or 4 Quakers there, and it was quite kind of dominated by people that were kind of career UN people that were really interested in like coming to this as a thing to get on their CV, like I have done work with an NGO kind of thing, and that gave it a certain balance. So this year they kind of swung it back in the other direction, and there are a lot of young people that were Quakers that were kind of, I guess, like me, kind of bright-eyed, like, oh, I don't know much about this, but like I'm a Quaker and it looks like they do cool stuff here, so I'll come along.
Yeah.
So we had a very kind of wholesome experience together. Everyone got along incredibly well. I think everyone was actively putting in lots of effort. There was no kind of marginalization of those that weren't Quakers, which I'd say that is quite Quakerly to do that. There was kind of no drama, no issues. Everyone was incredibly respectful in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before. This was, a big group of like 19 to 20, 18 to 25-year-olds. Like, there's going to be something, right? But everyone was just like completely lovely. And I remember on the last night we had a really sort of fantastic, treasured time to like say goodbye. It was very good experience.
Nice. I think that's what I thought it was, that there was this idea that the summer school had Quakers, but they weren't all necessarily Quakers. And I suppose that got me thinking on a couple of things. First off, do you know if because I know there's lots of NGOs and stuff there, do you know if there are other sort of other faith groups working there to any extent?
So we at one point we had someone from Baha'i faith on the panel, and that was, I know there are good connections there, kind of in the interfaith world. Quakers tend to do work in the interfaith space. Someone did ask the question, but I think it might have been at the end of a long day, and the answer escapes me. Yes, and I'm sure interested people can Google that for faith-based organizations in the UN, like what their interests are, how they relate to the countries that they act within. I don't know. I couldn't say.
There's a lot of support for the Baha'i faith on the Quaker Dub channel, so I think everyone will be very happy to hear that. And then my second question is, and maybe this is a bit of a difficult question, I suppose it's a question ultimately that Quakers need to ask themselves as well, is that what are we? I suppose we look at it in the case of the UN. What is our presence there? Are we there effectively as a group looking towards ideals based on religious inheritance? Or are we there as a religious organization looking to promote our testimonies? Because I think this is something that I think Quake. I think both can exist, but I think sometimes people, the difference between what is it, because Quakers are so intensely involved in things like politics and social action, that for some Quakers that can sort of seem like the be all and end all, that the religious aspect is kind of left or not prioritized as much, whereas I think other Quakers might be on the other hand. And so I'm just curious, I suppose, what is, if you were to look at the Quaker model in the UN, where do you think it fits? Do you think it has a particular religious strain, or do you think it is a group looking to achieve certain goals that have a religious strain? If that makes sense. I've said this in a very convoluted way.
No. I mean, it's. I think your question really strikes at the heart of something here. Like, it's clearly a faith-based and a values-based organization. Like, how does that manifest? So, I think the way to look at this is through actions rather than words. This goes back to what I got from Quakers at the very start. Is like, I was never told any dogma, because like people just kind of find their own relationship, and like they'll talk to you about it if they want, but they're not representing an organization. Quakers are all about like, okay, if you believe in these principles, like call them testimonies, like then go do them. Like, what are you doing about them? And so, in the context of the UN, this is working with the International Red Cross. This is going and communicating with diplomats that are trying to navigate that difficult space between wanting to develop and wanting to like look after the environment. Like, how do you use these resources that you've just discovered while also keeping the planet clean and adhering to like all the rules that are out there in the UN? These are the kind of things that Quakers are all about doing because they're focused on action and always have been focused on action. I'd say there is a kind of inherent fault here, which is actually not. First, what I'll say is doing some kind of asking around. Who are Quakers within the UN? Like, do people know who they are? Is this some like obscure like thing? I have a friend who let me know that the Quakers, like, they kind of annoy me because they give this like, we know how to do peace thing. They seem a bit sort of pompous about it. I thought that was quite funny. Firstly, I was satisfied that the first thing on his mind was not they're some religious group, they're like a bunch of nuts. So that was good. And then like it kind of makes me proud that they really do focus on that. They're known for their values, not and the things that they do, rather than trying to kind of make people think a certain way. Mm-hmm. And this again reflects like communicating with the people that run the course. I get this strong impression that they're not trying to promote Quakerism. They're not trying to like make people believe a certain thing. All they're trying to do is just like implement this dynamic of this is how we do things, and we find that it works, and like we think that you'll get things from it as well. So like give it a go. And like people ask about Quakers, they answer questions, but like they're very explicitly never trying to make anyone be a Quaker. They're just like, I guess the values, the Quaker testimonies are like, they're not kind of inherently religious. It's not like they're trying to promote people to like be virtuous and be faithful, and they're not big loaded terms. It's like simplicity and kindness. They're like nice human values.
And they can be taken on loads of different aspects. You can have that from religious conviction. You can have that for that, but you can also have that morally, integrally on a human level as well. So I suppose, but it all comes together. I suppose I was just interested on like. I think I'm just interested. I think I'm just interested to see what sort of like what the flavor of the organization is. Is it like what makes it different from another group or another NGO, say, trying to do the same things? And is there a difference, or is it simply down, would you say, to this process that the Quaker House uses?
Yeah. So this is something I wish I had like a more in-depth understanding of what like each NGO does, so I can understand how the specific day-to-day that Quakers do differs. I've said how like they're able to like stick at a problem for a long time, and this kind of extends to they have reputation. They're long established. They've been there since the very start. One of the first speakers that we had, in fact, was there in the kind of early days of the UN as it was transforming from the League of Nations. And it was basically just like a bunch of male lawyers just trying to like put out a bunch of law to dictate how like international infrastructure should work. I imagine that's very exciting if you're a lawyer. No one's done that before. Making international law for the first time must be pretty cool. And she was just interested in these like public events. No one else came to them, and she just arrived and she asked interested questions and studied and read, and they were really interested with her. And so at this kind of very early stage of the UN, they had a Quaker lady coming along and like asking good questions and like really highlighting like where the issues could be and getting really good responses from the lawyers. And I think since then they've just earned this reputation for being like present and asking good questions and like just being kind of competent. So I think people within the UN can know that Quakers aren't going to be coming along with an agenda. They're not coming along with an ulterior motive. They're very clear about what their values are, and that they exist, they work, they live, they breathe to forward these like positive values, which are very clearly good ones. So I think that exact reputation is something that means they can get a lot of things done. When their minds are set on something, they will kind of accomplish.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's right. It's something that I think is really good, and you've touched on it quite a few times, um, and I've noticed it in my own personal experience is that there, I think Quakers do have a really good quiet reputation. Like, considering that I don't think, in my mind, when I'm going around, like in my day to day, I kind of just think no one else knows about Quakerism. No one else knows about Quakers. But then, more often than not, when I start having conversations with people about Quakerism, they do know stuff. And often what they know is positive. I can't say, as a British Quaker, I can't say I've ever really even ever been asked, isn't that just a weird cult or sect? I haven't actually been asked that. Um, I've just got things like, oh yeah, they do really nice things, and I hear, that I hear that they're like really into peace and stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's it. Um,
Yeah, I
and so
think
it's
it
nice that
reflects
there
my
seem.
my poor research more than anything when I said that I expected them to
Mm,
be a bit of a cult. I don't think I've heard anyone go like, "Oh yeah, I thought that too." I think I just hadn't read any books at the time.
Oh well, no, don't worry. I've done a whole video on whether or not Quakerism is a cult, sect, or denomination. So um, check it out. So no, it certainly is a thing, and I think also in Britain, because we are more secular maybe than the US generally as a society. I think there is kind of like always a suspicion of that, because we know Anglicanism because it's everywhere, but everything else is kind of like, ooh, what are they? And then there could be a bit of aversion. So I think there's there, but I don't like when I've actually asked, talked to people about it. It's never been like that. It's always been like, oh yeah, we saw loads of them when we were on this like um, anti-war protest, and I thought it was really cool. They had like this meeting for worship in the middle of a protest, and I thought it was really cool. I'm like, go
Oh
Quakers.
yeah,
Um,
I ended up bumping into a few weeks ago at a West Hampstead meeting. I bumped into one of the guys that had represented XR putting paint on Stonehenge. I was like, that's a pretty extreme move. Like I'm still not quite
wow.
sure what I think about that one. But he was just there, hanging out. Oh,
Yeah,
all right,
there's
good to meet you.
there,
You're a Quaker. Fair dues. So,
there is a lot of my last meeting. They had lots of links with XR as well. But for maybe non-English listeners, XR stands for Extinction Rebellion, who are I'm not. Are they just British? I don't know, but are they international?
I don't know.
Mm. Anyway, they are environmental protesters, but they're known for being
UK founded
the way that
global
they
movement.
UK founded global movement. Okay, but if they haven't been globally moved to your location, that's what they are, and they're known for their very well kind of provocative action. I think it's fair to say, which yeah, I can see the link. The link is clear there between Quakers and Extinction Rebellion. But I think that they're different certainly in how they do things. But I can see where they merge that intersection of person. I can see a person who would be a Quaker and a member of Extinction Rebellion.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots of protesters. I think this is something that marks a lot of Quakers. When I say woke pensioners, like this is what I mean. These are people that have spent a long time sitting in circles pondering to start with religion, then after a long time realizing that a lot of it is historical or useful and interesting, but not, we shouldn't necessarily be dedicating our lives to Jesus in that sort of way. I only think about values and it becomes very humanizing. And then they go, well, if we have these values, we better like do something about it rather than just sit in a circle every week. So then you end up with a bunch of people that are suddenly deeply, deeply committed because they've thought about it a lot as a group to having positive impact. So it's been like,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure listeners of your podcast have a good understanding at this point of all the things that Quakers have done and the things that they continue to do. I say, yeah, there's this absolute like being like protesting kind of is sewn into the history. That's how I see it.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that can be a burden sometimes as well. I mean, I'm doing a playlist at the moment on the Quaker Testament. It's like going through one at a time, and some of them I feel like, yeah, I'd consider myself quite a simple person. Yeah, I consider myself quite a truthful person. The minute you get onto like equality and peace, certainly, then it's like, oh my gosh, I need to do more. And so I think that it can, but I think these are the questions. I think these are good life questions to be asking yourself. I think, what are you doing if you're not looking to try and make a more equal society? If you're not trying to make a more peaceful society, if you're just in it for you, then what are you even doing? I think what I liked when what you were saying about this reputation. I mean, also Quakers are so quiet about all this as well. I was talking to a young Quaker a couple of months ago, and she said the same. It's like Quakers have won the Nobel Peace Prize. Do you ever hear Quakers talk about that? Exactly, right? Literally, for I think it was services during World War II. But who talks about that? No one. I
Amazing.
found it out randomly on Quake on doing some online research and stuff. I'm like,
Committed to
why does no
humility,
one talk about
clearly.
this? Yeah,
I think that it's funny because this is, we're talking about social engineering, political engineering. This is not a way that you make your group succeed. If you want your religion to spread or you want your nation to succeed, you want people to hear about it. You want to be like right up in
yeah,
people's faces, going like, these are our beliefs. You should pay attention to this. This is more important than what you think right now. And then Quakers up for this very quiet. They don't bring it up in conversation. It's just this kind of slow waves
no,
that kind of like impact large things over time. And
yeah,
I mean, I think it's beautiful. It might well mean that Quakers just shrink. People don't know about them. People don't seek out to join communities these days. I don't know what the future looks like. But, from that perspective, I don't know what the kind of like evolutionary cell of Quakers might look like in the future.
yeah. That is something that I want to ask you later, but we'll get there. But I just, yeah. And sometimes you just listen to like what some of these people have done. Like you might just be chatting over like a coffee and a digestive biscuit after meeting or whatever, and then like this Quaker just like brings out like, oh yeah, by the way, I did this. I was like, what? Why did, why are you not talking about this all the time? I've known you for a year. Why has this never come up? But I think it's what they're like. So finishing it off then in terms of your time there, what do you think were the experiences, or what do you think were the things that will stick with you in terms of your understanding of Quakerism, your understanding of interactions with people or politics, whatever? What are your key takeaways, would you say, from your time there?
One thing is speaking to diplomats and understanding that like these are people too. And even though they're representing, as I said before, huge numbers of people without being elected to do it, representing the interests of their country, they are like at the end of the day just like humans interacting with one another. And it's the same in the business world. You can have like multi-million-dollar deals like fall through at the last minute because like someone like gave a weird look to someone because actually they were just tired because they like didn't have a coffee or something. Like this like kind of weird subtle like human psychology stuff like has a huge impact on like on people's lives for decades at a time. And it's the same thing in the UN. And so at the start I would have been kind of critical about like, why are you focusing on individuals here? The kind of like traditional political science approach will be like, how do nations interact? How can we kind of, move these like big claws, these big like entities along beside one another? And that's how historians like to see like the history of the UN. But it always comes down to just like humans being in the right place at the right time. And I think that's something that's really hit home for me there as well. In fact, something that I've brought home. It turns out that there are some as a group of Quakers here in England that reached out to QUNO at one point to try to bring the kind of Quaker process, the quiet diplomacy, over to MPs in the UK. And so I've been in touch with these guys as well, and they're kind of wanting to get that work going too. So that in particular, this like quiet diplomacy as a piece of political technology even is something that I'm super, super interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's seen like Prime Minister's Question time, for example, will know that the House of Commons is not necessarily a quiet diplomatic place all the time. I like that. I mean, I think that's absolutely true, and I hadn't really considered either the whole idea that politics is seen by historians, by political scientists, as like, the interactions between nations and states and things like that. When I was listening to a podcast quite recently about the outbreak of the First World War, and when you think about that, like when we're taught about it in school, for example, you talk about Germany did this and Austria did this and Russia did this, but actually the podcast was looking at the actual diplomats who were doing this, and they were saying that they were all like absolute tearful wrecks by the end of it. They were all like absolutely devastated by what's happened, and that story kind of gets lost in Germany did this, and then they had to invade France, and they had to, and then all this gets all like the human cost, and how actually if that human interaction had gone better, things like that could have easily have been avoided, if there was an ability for them to be all brought together and so on. So yes, I agree. One thing that we haven't mentioned and you brought up is the International Red Cross, and maybe like how the Quakers work with them. Do you want to just maybe expand on that a little bit?
The International Red Cross were another one of the highlights. This is one of the visits that we did. They have firstly a really lovely museum actually in Geneva, which is a beautifully designed space. They have lots of like interactive exhibits, and you get a way of interacting with the work that's been done by the Red Cross really, really, really well. And we again got to speak to some of the sort of senior members, got to talk from them, got to ask them some detailed questions, and it's another one of these sort of slow wave things that blends very well with the way the Quakers like to do stuff. The Red Cross are all about building relationships with governments and understanding the needs of the people, and while the governments aren't able to meet those needs, they can step in and put their charitable funding in the right place. And this is something that I think a lot of the charity space is not really able to do, particularly the kind of new founded stuff. I'm going to point my finger at the effective altruism movement, which is quite a popular one at the moment. And there's a lot of how do we maximize the good that we do? How do we kind of like itemize this so that we can, minimize the loss of human life, and end up spending loads and loads of money on buying lots of mosquito nets, not realizing like what you're doing is maybe like stopping people from dying from mosquitoes, but there's 100 other ways that people could die. And there's also like systemic corruption in these places, and people aren't having a very good quality of life either. So there are like so many kind of interesting, knotty details if you want to do good work to improve the lives of people in the long term. And these are things that you can only get at if you have long-standing relationships, personal relationships with the right people. And so the Red Cross seemed to be really, really good at that. And that's what I took away from that space. So that said, I couldn't, to answer the other part of your question, I don't really know what the Quakers do alongside them. They clearly are, very goal aligned. It might be that they kind of just watch one another do each their own thing. But I'd say that I'm a big fan of that organization now.
Obviously, you've come out with a really, really cool experience. If there was anyone listening who maybe think maybe that'd be something that I would like to do, what advice would you have for them? How could they get involved? Any Genevan tips of what to do when they get there? What would you say to them?
I'd say like go through your local meeting. They're very, very encouraging. It was that made the process very easy. And I say like I actually applied for the previous year as well, and I wasn't accepted that time. I was accepted the second time when I was like, hold on a sec, why am I like, I get like this when I do applications. I'll think, oh, they must want me to be like this, and I'll kind of write as though I'm that person. And then I've been kind of realizing since then that like, hold on a sec, it could be me reading an application. Like, I don't want to read someone that's like putting themselves in a box. I want to read an application from like a real person with actual like thoughts and beliefs, because I know that everyone is unique and worthy of like independent respect. I want to see that person like share that. So this like second time application, I was like, here I am, like I'm a Quaker to like this extent, and I've been along to, for that many thing. I was encouraged to do this. Here's me. So that's, I guess, the advice I give, which also feels like pretty kind of generic, like application advice, is just like be authentic. And that's, I mean, again, more broadly, like Quakers are pretty good at being authentic. That's my opinion.
That's it. I mean, I think I felt the same. Like at first, I kind of like I was worried when I sent my application off because I had no like podcasting, vlogging experience at all. I didn't know what I was doing, and I kind of felt like, oh, should I like not say that and maybe like try and pull something out to make it seem like I know what I'm doing. And in the end, I decided no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say I'm interested. I watch a lot of things on YouTube, and maybe I should do it too. But I don't. I need stuff. But yeah, so I think definitely being authentic, I think, is something that Quakers, even when you're just talking to Quakers, I don't think Quakers have any time for like people who are trying to promote themselves or say think be something that they're not. You get a real sense of like when you talk to like Quakers with a lot of experience, they're people who like just want to say what they believe. They will say what they believe. They will listen to you, and they'll be respectful of you. But they won't kind of be around the bush in any way. They're quite forthcoming with their opinion. Right. So I've kind of got to finish off the video, Jethro. Thank you very much for bearing with me. Maybe some quick fire Quaker questions.
Sure.
So my first one is, and you can take your time to think about it. Who is your favourite Quaker? And it could be a modern Quaker, it could be someone who you know, or it could be throughout our history, and why.
Let me go to like the early business Quakers. I couldn't give you a name, but Mr. Cadbury. The reputation that I've been told he had is that he made all this money from selling chocolate, and kind of had a bit of a crisis. He didn't know what to do with it, with all this like profit that he'd made, and so he very insistently like fed this back into the people. This is the kind of thing that's a real gem to find in history. There's people are talking now about like transformative approaches to economics. How can we like use grassroots approaches to make sure that like companies are returning value to the people rather than just trying to extract and make more profit? Like this is what was happening hundreds of years ago, just by like values. People that wanted to just be good to others and were like, well, I have all these employees now. I have a whole lot of power to make their lives better. Let me do that. And it's like fantastic to understand that there are people, back in history that have done exactly this.
Yeah, I think he's John Cadbury, I think, and then he had, and yeah, they all look very similar, like his son and like his two sons, and they all had massive beards. And they can't really tell you the difference between them. I think there was a Henry as well.
That's my kind of person.
Yeah, I mean, it made chocolate, looked after his people. I think that one of them built Woodbrook, the Quaker Research Center. So it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, no, good. John Cadbury, good choice. Second question. We kind of talked about this before about like the future of Quakerism and like where Quakerism is going. For you, what do you think? Where do you think Quaker's going to be in like 20, 30 years? I think Ben Pink Dandelion said like in the 90s or something that Quakerism would be extinct by 2030. I think hopefully we can hang on for another 6 years. But what do you think is the future of Quakerism? What would you like to see more in Quakerism? What do you think things that Quakers are doing going well?
I hope I've kind of emphasized already, like what draws me to Quakers is like it's this kind of slow waves of movement. It's the like insistence on patience, I suppose, and the fact that it somehow exists, but also doesn't have anything that it wants me to do. And I think that this is fantastic balance that it's there. As a kind of comparison, here in London, there's like always like new events and communities and things kind of cropping up and disappearing, and you know, I see all the many things that don't survive, and every now and then there's something that does survive. And so it's so
Mm.
interesting to see something like Quakers that has survived for a really long time, and is also as like open as it is. I think there's something kind of very special and unique that I find it hard to put my finger on quite, about the kind of framework of Quakers. And
Mm.
I think that the lack of judgment, the fact that there's no expectation. I've tried to kind of prod. I'm such a cheeky person. I try to kind of poke and prod and find, people's conservatism. Like I'll like rock up in a fancy shirt. I was like, oh, I'm dressed like quite fancy today. So, try and get someone to like respond as though they think that you're not meant to wear fancy clothes out of this like testament to simplicity. But then like I got spoken to with, I was responded with like, hold on a sec. No, if you think that's going to be an issue, like you've got the total wrong idea. It's like, well,
Mm.
okay, fine, all right. That's on me then. I shouldn't have brought it up. So you get there's something so kind of tremendously like thoughtful and non-judgmental about everything Quaker. And so like every time I try to question it, I just fall in love with it a bit more.
Every time I come back, like when I'm on my way back from meeting, I'm always just very happy that I went. Like that's like that's my main feeling coming out. I always feel like that felt good. I feel like I feel that was a very wholesome experience. I felt not judged at all. I felt I was able to say what I wanted to say. Took part in as much as I wanted to take part, and was respected. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think that's something which, because I think you're absolutely right. We live in like in a society now where um, it's all like immediate. It's all like now, and especially in London, things are pop-ups, pop up, and they are there for like maybe like a week or whatever, and then they go, and then there's no lasting community, or very, and that's suddenly I think very hard, especially for young people as well, who are looking maybe for a greater sense of community, but all they have is their WhatsApp chats, and and things in London like that come and go. So I think Quakerism does provide like a really nice sort of non-judgmental, long-lasting community, which they can fit quite nicely in. I suppose my last question then is, if you're looking at quite a lot of people on the channel are, um, there are quite a lot of people who are well-established Quakers, but there are also quite a lot of people who are just curious about Quakerism, not Quakers, but come across videos because like they type in "what's Quakerism" into YouTube or whatever. And so if they stumble across this video and I ask the question, well, what would you say to people who are interested in Quakerism? What would you advise them to do? What judging but from like your own recent experience, like how have you found joining Quakerism? Um, how can they get involved? What are maybe some do's or don'ts in terms of starting that journey?
So, I mean, the like obvious easy thing is just to like go to a meeting and see what you think of it.
Mm.
And I mean, and that's been my approach as well, actually. So my girlfriend, or recently fiance, has she's like kind of curious about this thing. She's got a pretty strict Christian background. She's not interested in like anything of the sort, but she's been along to a meeting once, and
Hmm.
she's like been on Wikipedia. That's her approach. She like go and research stuff, and she's like told me things about like, oh, like there are most Quakers like over in Africa, and like look, it's quite traditional over in the US. It's like quite like a lot like normal Christianity. I'm like, well, I've been to like one in Brighton and like a few in London, and like there's no conservatism here. Like it's not the vibe I've got. So like if you go and do research, you'll get like one impression. Clearly, I have like now experienced that the benefit here is through the interactive part. So I would just recommend going and like chatting to Quakers. That, I mean, they're already like in the podcast, already interested enough, right? It's just a matter of like human interaction.
Yeah, and I think not to be, I think not to, because because you're absolutely right that there's no Quakers that you're not asked to do anything or believe anything, and I think people aren't used to that, and so I think um, people kind of, well, can I just go? And we're like, like, yeah, just go, see what happens. they might at the end ask you like to talk about yourself because they're curious, but
Oh yeah, I
you
remember
don't
how
have to.
sort of hilariously like awkward it felt the first time. I was like, so I quite that first time going in Brighton, like when I've had a few drinks, something that I liked to do at the time was I'd like get into a staring contest with someone. You know, it'd like right, let's set a timer. We've got to do 10 minutes, unbroken eye contact, and let's see like how close we can get. And so I'm pretty used to just like this, like kind of deliberately, intensely quite awkward thing. And then rocking up to Quakers, it's like, so we're all doing this now. Like we're just like here. It's this kind of like hump to get over.
I think that's actually, to be honest, I think that's something that I really mentioned at all. That, yeah, a Quaker meeting for worship doesn't start. There's no like, and now the meeting starts. You just walk into a room, and then once you're there, you're there. That's. I mean, you can leave, obviously. No one's going to force you, but I think that's something, because obviously, like with other Christian services and stuff, like it's very clear when it starts because you're asked to read the someone's reading something at you or talking at you or singing something at you or marching in, whatever. It's very clear. With Quaker, as it started, I mean, it's not quite past. I mean, no, it's already started.
Like I picked up at one point there's like the big red book and the little red book. Little red book is the advices and queries, and the big one's got all the like the rules of the, you know, this is where it's all written down. And there's something about like the meeting begins when the first person sits down. I think like
effectively, yeah. So I mean, like there's but like, there's no like announcement. As soon as someone's gone in.
You could even say there's the opposite of an announcement. You'll have to have me back in 6 years, Ollie, and I've got a bit more experience as a Quaker. You know, we can look back on the ashes of Quakerism before.
Do you remember this thing called Quakerism? It's a shame it died in 2031. Oh no. Well, what a brilliant discussion. Thanks so much, Jethro. I feel like I've learned, because I knew nothing about. I knew QUNO existed and I knew the UN existed, but I couldn't really necessarily tell you what they did together. So that's been really interesting to hear, and it's not something that I feel I know a lot of. So I feel I've really learned a lot. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Ollie. Thank you so much for having me here, for being patient through all my incredibly cheeky answers. Always happy to be podcasted, and so like happy that this exists. I love that you're doing it, and I want to see what you do thrive.
Brilliant. Right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Maybe we'll get Jethro back on in 6 years and see if we're still here. Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.